Hello, everyone, and welcome to the BuzzStream Podcast. My name is Vince Nero, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by the digital PR lead at Embryo, Alice Walker Gibbons. How you doing, Alice?
I'm good, thank you. Pleased to be here.
Yeah, this is great. So we've met a few times, I guess, virtually. I've had a chance to talk a little bit about what Embryo does. And I think, where our talk is going to go today is something that not a ton of agencies do here in the US, I'd say. And it says kind of reactive PR services.
Yeah.
So pumped to get into that. But before we do, I just want to remind everybody to like and subscribe, leave a comment, 5-star review, all that good stuff for this podcast. The more that you can share this and the more we get this out there, the more I can have great guests on like Alice. Alice, tell me a little bit about PR at Embryo. I know, you have a few kind of different services that we talked about that Embryo does for digital PR. And if you want, you can talk about Embryo at large. I know it's kind of a more full service platform, but I'm also specifically interested in the digital PR services that we spoke about.
Yeah, sure. So Embryo as an agency offers kind of integrated services. So from affiliates, paid social, PPC, creative, and then PR as well, obviously. So we have a few different streams of activity. So from kind of that reactive press office pillar to more stories. So there it can be kind of SEO-led stories, which hone in on like key focus areas and help to boost organic growth of specific categories. Or it could be more brand-led stories. So whether it's to support kind of a product launch or key messages that a brand wants to really kind of put out there. And then those bigger creative campaigns as well. So that can kind of be multi-touch point, multi-channel, and are those kind of bigger, more awareness-led pieces, but also help to support organic growth as well.
Yeah. And I guess the reason that I brought up the reactive PR thing was probably because I was writing a piece about it at the time. So it was very top of mind, but it was something that, you specifically said, right? Like you have it as kind of one of your 3 pillars of service offerings. And I mentioned this earlier, but I, at least personally, feel like the reactive PR piece isn't as prevalent here in the US. And it may just be the fact that the US is so large and the UK is so small, but condensed. It feels like it's, just something that a lot more UK agencies are keen to kind of provide within their services. Does that kind of sound like the case for you as well?
Yeah, I typically say I've always kind of come across a kind of reactive element in kind of agencies here as well. But everyone kind of has different phrases or terminology, I find, from agency to agency and even PR to PR. But for us, it's very much kind of a part of that story-led strategy. So it's kind of a supporting element to it. So it can be anything from, kind of monitoring the news, journalist requests, that more kind of technical link building aspect as well. So kind of link reclamation, unlinked brand mentions and converting those. And kind of product pushes as well in response to trends. So it's that kind of always on approach, and that helps to support kind of the wider strategy as well. But interesting that it's not really taken off as much in the US. It feels like
I would say it might be kind of more because of the focus more on like link building side of things and less on the tying the digital PR into more like traditional PR story-led stuff. A lot, don't get me wrong, there's plenty of agencies that do it, but I just don't feel like it's as prevalent. So I'd like to get into setting up the press office, as you called it, and kind of tactical advice that you have for people. But let's start instead kind of with outlining maybe a campaign that you've had success with this in, because I think it'll kind of help people understand kind of the building blocks and the potential end result. So do you have an example of a campaign that you might be able to kind of walk us through for the like reactive PR approach?
Yeah, sure. So we've got a good example recently, actually. In the UK, there's been a big surge of norovirus, which is a sickness bug, which thankfully I've not had.
The 24-hour sickness, right? It's the worst. I think I got it right before I moved out of New York City. Like the night before, I had to delay my flight.
Yeah, not good.
Yeah.
So yeah, we spotted that there was a surge in cases, and the NHS had released some data. I think it was compared to the previous couple of months. And typically for this kind of time of year, the cases were way higher than usual. So we have a client who kind of provide online training courses, and healthcare courses is one of their key focus areas. So we already had an existing piece with some kind of relevant information on kind of the medications that you shouldn't take together. And then we spotted this trending news story and thought that could be a great hook. So we tweaked what we already had with the data in and just made it more relevant to the trending news story and added in a couple of additional tips. And then we outreached that to kind of key media titles, and it landed across nationals and regionals with SEO writers as well, and really got on like some great titles, including kind of the Mirror, Express, and a few others. So yeah, it was a really quick turnaround. It didn't take us that long either, which often I feel is the way with Reactive. Sometimes you can work so hard on a big campaign and it doesn't necessarily land as much as a 1 hour Reactive can. But yeah, it went on to do really, really well with kind of limited resource, really.
Yeah. So the turnaround was 1 hour. Is that
so I think
legit? Yeah.
Yeah, we drafted it in about an hour. And then we outreached it the same day that we spotted it. So yeah, speed is quite key. But I think because it was just breaking in the news as well, so we caught it right at the kind of tip. The only kind of coverage it had got was from the NHS data itself, so no other PRs had had chance to jump in there yet. I think that's the key bit when you're doing a reactive. You kind of have to assess, is it worth it? Can you do it in the time that you've got? It always helps as well. Thankfully, our clients are really quick at signing things off, so that really helps as well. Obviously, if you've got, a longer approval process to go through, then that can make it a little bit more tricky. But in this case, it worked out.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because I do think that is a big piece of this. But I want to understand too so like the NHS, you saw this trending topic, the norovirus trending. How did you come across this? Is this something you actively look for health trends on like a daily basis?
Yeah, so I'd say every day we spend the first hour and then we check intermittently throughout the day across different news sources. So Google News is great for just a snapshot of what's going on in the world. And then we check kind of BBC News as well. And then we break it down into industry specific as well. So making sure that we're reading all the niche ones that we might not naturally read, but our clients are obviously really important in that space. So yeah, making sure you're kind of digesting all that news. And I think we spotted this one just from a Google News alert that came through. And then, yeah, it made the perfect fit for this piece that we already had.
Okay, so once you kind of find this trending topic, I think the interesting part for me was the connection to the existing content. And to me, that it takes like, you really have to be really in line with and in tune with all the content that your client has, right? Like to be able to pick this out. I mean, do you always need an existing piece of content to tie it to? I guess let's start there.
Yeah, no, you don't always need an existing piece. If you had the time, you could quickly draft something up, which we do. But again, it's about kind of assessing, will this be a great success? Is it worth putting the time in? Sometimes some reactives you might think, we've already got great results already this month, we might park that one. But sometimes, yeah, if it is just breaking, you're thinking this would be so good for the client, drafting a completely new expert comment or reaching out to the client for some unique data on it could be a great way to kind of jump on it. But yeah, typically we do utilize our kind of bank of content and repurpose it for a lot of opportunities. So this works really well in the interior space, especially. So for one client, we might draft a story and then we can adapt it and repurpose it many times, and you can sometimes spot kind of an opportunity and think, okay, I've already got this content on file, how can I tweak it? And just a few tweaks can kind of make it work for the journalist and their requests. So yeah, that definitely helps. I think as well when it comes to ideation, having that in the back of your mind and kind of focusing on evergreen pieces of content that can be adapted is a great way to kind of get the most out of each piece that you're producing as well.
Yeah. I mean, are you doing also like site searches? Like, I'm sure there's times when you're like, this would be a great connection for XYZ site, but I don't actually have, you don't know off the top of your head what posts they've written or what information is on the site. So like, yeah, so you talked about having like a content bank, right? Like understanding and kind of being aware of what your client has already written so that you can kind of repurpose this for your reactive piece. What about those who, have a super large content bank, or you're just not as familiar? Maybe you're a newer PR to a client, you're not as familiar with the content. How do you recommend, I guess, people kind of get familiar quickly?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think one thing we like to do when we onboard clients is to kind of do an audit of their site. So their existing blog can be a great place to start. So we've had quite a lot of success from that, actually. So just making sure you're aware of the content they've got. If there's anything that stands out, maybe jotting it down. We have kind of a centralized, what we call a hub, where we kind of track links and coverage, but also any kind of document links to pre-existing reactives that we've done, just so that we've got them all in one place. We can reuse them basically. But yeah, looking at the blog and kind of making sure we've got those key pieces down that we think could work. But also their social media channels as well is a good place. So if they've got kind of TikTok, pushing those out, if they've got kind of good stuff on there or expert-led pieces, that can also be a great kind of quick win. So I think it's just getting to grips with each client and familiarizing yourself with all the different kind of pieces that they've already got to hand that you could potentially use. And then when you see kind of reactive opportunities come through, just double checking, making sure you're kind of not just relying on, the one piece that you're currently outreaching, and trying to think in the back of your mind of all the different pieces of content that they've got and how it could work, would be kind of the best way to approach it.
Yeah, it's something that's always, I feel like it differs based on the agencies that you speak with here or that I speak with. And the thing that I'm kind of curious about how you do this approach is, kind of mentioned this a little bit. It's like, repurposing a piece of content and then pitching it, or gathering a quote and pitching that. So like norovirus is trending, the journalists you want to write to, the content that you have specifically. Are you basically saying like, here's a quote from my client and here's a piece that we have? Or are you actually putting that whole piece or like, highlights from that piece into the email outreach, like the actual email itself?
Yeah, so I'd make it as tailored as possible. So in that case of the norovirus, we made it really super tailored to that angle. So we included the data from NHS in there, referenced how to avoid the bug, and just made it super tailored to that angle, because it was kind of trending. And then we went out to SEO journalists. So I think making sure that your content is not only updated in the pitch email, but also in the press release is really key, just to make sure the story aligns. I think it's a bit of a pet peeve if a journalist opens something and whilst the pitch might be super up to date and have all the kind of trending news in there, if the press release looks out of date, it can, I think, look a bit off-putting. So I'd say make sure the story is aligned from the pitch all the way through to the press release, for kind of the best chance of success.
Yeah, so let's dig into that a little bit more. Again, like the press release piece is, I think, another thing that differs from agency to agency. Some people don't send press releases with every pitch. Some people do. It sounds like maybe Embryo does.
Yeah.
So the pitch itself, the pitch email is kind of basically like a condensed version of the press release, and then you're also attaching a press release, or you actually copying and pasting the press release within the email?
Yeah, so we copy and paste the press release into the email, just so it's all in one place, all in there. And we'll typically kind of, in the pitch, we might play around with different angles. So for example, the first angle will be the norovirus angle, so using that original data. But then in the follow-up, we might use a secondary angle in the pitch. So if there's anything new that's come out around norovirus that we can add in to refresh it, or maybe a more general kind of winter health angle. So the pitch is where you can kind of play around with the follow-ups. But yeah, typically speaking, we'll include kind of the obviously the subject line, nice, short and snappy subject line. And then the pitch will have kind of data in, introduce the expert. We might bold certain bits to pull out kind of key messages, or, if we've got a really great expert as part of it. And then we'll summarize it with, I love a bullet point. So we'll summarize with a few bullet points probably. And then if it is something that has imagery, kind of linking out to high res imagery as well, and then the press release. So yeah, that's the kind of typical format we follow.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I mean, that based off of some of the journalists I've talked to, that kind of sounds like the preferred approach. I mean, it's basically giving the journalist every single thing they need to be able to go off and just write a post, right? Without even contacting you back.
Yeah, exactly. I think journalists, they don't have much time. So making sure it's all there, ready for them, just increases kind of best chance of it being covered.
And a very kind of nitpicky detail question, I guess, is you mentioned adding imagery. Are you attaching these as file attachments or linking to like a Dropbox or something?
Yeah, we typically link to a folder. So just adding in all the kind of imagery, naming them as well. Is
there a reason you do it that way versus attachments? Or do journals not like attachments in your experience?
I've just personally always emailed out, but I just think it's a bit more of a cleaner way. And sometimes as well on kind of Dropbox, you can see if the link has been opened. So it's another kind of indication of whether it's got legs and is going to be covered. But typically I'll just email out to kind of the folder.
For what it's worth, I've heard, speaking to a couple journalists, that the attachments are not a great idea.
Yeah.
It sometimes gets caught in spam and they just kind of don't like it. So yeah, it sounds like the link is the best way to do it.
Yeah. I think as well, adding kind of images into that body copy of the email can sometimes cause emails to go into spam as well. So sometimes we test it out. I think it's a bit of an ongoing debate, but yeah, we have noticed a few times that open rates will be a bit lower if we do put the images directly in the body copy. So I think, testing it out is a good way to kind of go about it, but typically link out to the images instead.
Yeah, that makes total sense. One thing I think I want to ask about before we get into like even more tactical advice with this is, do you think reactive PR is something that you can build an entire strategy off of? Like, can clients rely fully on this approach, or is this more of like a supportive approach that you do alongside of the SEO content or the hero campaigns?
Yeah, so for me, I feel like it is more of that supporting element to the overarching strategy. I have worked on clients previously where it is the sole focus, and it does definitely work. There's obviously more opportunity in some sectors than others, and that's kind of the problem with it. So if you were to lean on reactive PR solely, you're kind of waiting for the news agenda to happen and then for you to jump on it. So there's not a huge amount that you can kind of do other than in response to the news. So in that sense, I would say it's definitely always kind of more valuable to pair it with those stories or campaigns and see it as a bit more of a supporting element. But it definitely does help, and is kind of helps that always on consistent stream of links and coverage coming through. But I would always recommend kind of having other parts of the strategy as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to talk more about the kind of proactive PR approach, and if that's something that you do as well at Embryo.
Yeah, definitely. So that's what we call our stories.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, so that is our kind of proactive planned in content. So we'll have strategy and ideation session. If it's an SEO-led account, we'll work with the SEOs on that account to identify key focus areas, and then we'll ideate around those focuses, and then we'll kind of have a story strategy. So, however, once a month or 2 a month, and then we'll get in that flow of outreaching them, and then we'll use Reactive to support them as well.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people talk about, depending on the industry, maybe there's major industry trends reports that come out, about in the industry, and kind of planning around that, or like there's maybe an event that happens, you talk about like the major sporting event, like that kind of holidays, Black Friday, like
Yeah,
you can kind of set those as tent poles or, like lines in the sand where you can kind of then strategize towards them, it sounds like. Is that kind of how you think about it?
yeah, definitely. So yeah, those kind of awareness days, they're quite a good one to do content
Mm,
around as well. And then yeah, like you say, if it's more you might have, you sometimes find in B2B or more niche industries that they have actually kind of industry events coming up. So then using that as kind of a hook as well. So yeah, making sure they're mapped into your kind of calendar, and weaving them into the brainstorm brief as well when you come to that stage, will help you kind of align the two together and kind of make planned in articles around those events.
yeah. One last question again before we get into the tactical thing. Where does the term newsjacking, where like do you put that, is that the same as reactive PR for you, or do you put
Yeah,
reactive PR and proactive PR under the newsjacking bucket?
it all gets a bit messy, doesn't it, in terms of
Yeah.
terms, but I think for me, newsjacking sits under that always on press office and reactive. So yeah, there is definitely, whether you spot a trending news story and then you jump on it. So that to me would fall under kind of reactive and press office, but I'm going to contradict myself here. But then there is always, say if you've got a big campaign that's kind of your own outreach and you spot a reactive angle and you go out with that reactive angle, it does kind of blurred lines. But generally speaking, I'd say under, that kind of always on approach.
Yeah, I struggled with that a lot when I was writing my newsjacking guide. It was like how, because everybody talks about it slightly differently. Okay, so let's get into kind of the build of this process. We talked about how you monitor news, Google News, social monitoring, that sort of thing. I'm curious about, either as an agency or even a freelancer, like, is it a team thing? I guess this is more agency question, but like, is it one person that does this? Is it a team? Do you get together and talk about events? I've talked to some agencies that do that on a weekly basis,
Yeah.
as part of this like news desk. Talk to me about how, like, what the ideal setup looks like.
Yeah, definitely. So, obviously, if you work in PR, consuming the news is obviously key to your role. So we always encourage, in the morning to check in on that news. And then we have a centralized Slack channel where we'll share opportunities with each other. So, whether it's not your actual client, but we'll kind of put in opportunities for whoever works on that account. So we definitely see it as more of a collaborative approach. We don't necessarily have, one person does reactive and that's their job. I think that could work if you had a client, a lot of clients on for that service. But as we kind of position it as a supporting pillar, it just makes sense for us all to kind of own it and collaborate on it. And then we also have kind of weekly sessions as well, where we'll kind of check in on outreach and also look ahead to kind of key dates, things coming up that we can comment on for our clients as well. So yeah, it's always having it kind of in the back of your mind, making sure that you're collaborating, making sure that everyone is kind of sharing opportunities with each other, because, some people's feeds could be very different to others. So it really helps if you kind of all come together and share the insight, essentially.
I love that. And the Slack thing kind of seems like the most obvious choice for that. I'm curious then, when it gets to like the client side, and having them looped in on things, that to me seems a little tougher. And I'm kind of going out of order a little bit, but let's stay on this strain of once you have an idea, is it something that you get approval for right away, or are you then building, whatever the pitch is going to be, and then you get approval from the client? Because that seems like a lot of work to do if the client's going to ultimately say no.
Yeah. So thankfully, we have some clients that just trust us to kind of go ahead. So that obviously helps a lot because the news works very quickly. So that obviously helps to cut out that kind of, middle person. But for those clients that are a little bit more involved, we would always kind of pitch it to them at that stage. So we might spot an opportunity, think, oh, this is great. And then we'll just fire it over. So as part of the onboarding process, we always kind of like to set expectations on the reactive process with clients ahead of it, obviously kicking off, just so that they know what to expect, what we kind of need from them. So then, if we spot an opportunity, we'll send it over. Hopefully they'll approve it in good kind of time. And then we start cracking on with the build work as well. So it can work a couple of different ways, but I think involving the client as well and giving them the heads up that you're going for it either way, regardless of whether they like to approve it or not, is still good, because it shows that, they see that you're being proactive and that you're actually, cracking on with things, and can see that you're kind of going after these opportunities and helping to place them, even if it doesn't actually work out. I think it's always a good thing to kind of show that it's happening.
Yeah. I mean, do you have any advice for people? It sounds like you've had some good luck with some good clients. Do you have any advice for people that kind of are getting some resistance from clients, or maybe the client is slow to respond? What does that kind of talk look like for you?
Yeah, no, I've definitely had that as well. So I'd say, going back to my point earlier around evergreen content, I think that is a really great way to make sure that you've got content that will work for various different angles over a course of multiple months. So, it might be quite a simple tips-led piece, but if you can kind of, at ideation stage, kind of ideate for these ideas that you could work for kind of seasonal angles, a more evergreen angle, that kind of thing. I'd say that could work quite well, because then the content's already signed off, so they wouldn't have to kind of reapprove anything. It would just be a case of pushing it out again. So that can definitely work, and has worked for me in the past as well. And then I'd also say trying to agree on kind of named experts, or kind of a comment or quote bank as well, can be quite good. So using kind of time and resource to generate kind of quotes and comments that you think, again, will be quite evergreen, can kind of tie into seasonality as well coming up, and then agreeing on kind of named experts as well. So again, it just helps to minimize that kind of speed that you need at the reactive time.
Yeah, I mean, I could kind of think of a few industries where it really would benefit you to talk and get these kind of out as quickly as possible, or kind of get these guidelines and like quotes kind of approved as far ahead of time as you can. Which brings me kind of to my next question is, are there some industries that this works best for, and, conversely, the ones that it's not as easy for?
Yeah, definitely. I think home and interiors is a great one. There are so many journalist requests that come through every day for home and interiors. There's loads of opportunity. So yeah, it definitely works really well in that space. I'd say when it comes to the trickier ones, it's definitely the more niche kind of industries. I've got a client in the trucking industry, and you don't see many opportunities for that. So yeah, there's definitely some where there is more than others. So in that case, making sure that you're leaning on other tactics, and it comes back to the point of that reactive strategy on its own maybe isn't the right one if you do have a more niche client.
Yeah. I mean, I could see instances where maybe one or two come up a year, and you can still potentially just like jump on them just as a value add to the client, maybe even for free. It's like, but you're not going to build an entire strategy on it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Do you put the like responding to journalist requests in that same bucket as reactive PR?
Yeah, I would say so. I think, that kind of media monitoring and building journalist requests, responding to them would all kind of sit under reactive for me anyway. But I think as well, media intros and kind of building that relationship with the journalist is part of that as well. So that, ideally you're moving into a place where you've got some good relationships where they would reach out to you for commentary as well. So I think it all comes into that kind of press office kind of stream and always on activity again.
Okay, so you brought up this really good point of kind of the press people kind of building relationships with journalists. I'm really curious about how that practice kind of happens within this. I mean, is that something that you do at the very onset of taking on clients, like the same time that you're building your quote bank and building your content bank, are you also then having this press room just reach out to key journalists and start to develop these relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. I think whenever you onboard a new client, as part of that onboarding process, identifying kind of the key contacts in each space is really key. So, if you're onboarding a new interior client, having a look through kind of their competitors' backlink profiles, using Ahrefs to identify which journalists are linking to their competitors, and then kind of creating a key contacts list. I'm very against having a set media list. I like to always update it, make sure it's tailored. But I do think in some cases, key contacts are natural. You are always going to have a few like key ones in each sector. And yeah, just introducing yourself and your new client to them. And even if you've had the client on board for a few months or a year or whatever it might be, just checking in every few months and kind of reintroducing your client. Or sometimes, obviously from an agency perspective, we have, multiple clients in certain sectors. So it can be quite helpful to both us and the journalist if you reach out, introducing kind of several experts in that space, and just align on what they can comment on or what value they can bring. And that just helps to kind of keep your kind of contacts, your clients in the journalist's mind as well. And then the journalist hopefully would start reaching out to you as well. But I think that comes with time. And I think it also comes with making sure, if you do go after a journalist request, making sure you're kind of ensuring it's what they're asking for, making sure it's valuable, and again, delivering on speed, making sure you're reliable. And that will kind of help encourage a journalist to come back to you as well.
Yeah, I mean, those are great tips. And, everybody that I've spoken to recently who's talking about journalist requests is all about speed and kind of getting that out there. But they also bring up this idea of like, at the end of the day, the more relationships you build, like the more you can kind of circumvent these platforms. You don't even need to worry about checking your HAROs or your connectivelys or your quoted, whatever platform you use, or journal requests. I am curious about how kind of detailed you get with your kind of targeting. So let's use this case of the norovirus, right? Are you specifically, so you talked about like having your key journalists, right? So like maybe that's like step one is like reach out to the key journalists.
Yeah.
But then like step 2 and 3, is it like, or maybe it's like tier 2 and 3, is it anybody that's talked about norovirus in the past few weeks or something? And then are you just kind of backing outward from that? And then kind of how far general do you go? Is it just anybody by the end, anyone who's talked about health topics?
No, I would say I'm much more of a fan of a small media list. In my experience, a small media list always gets more results than a big media list. So yeah, I'd say step 1 is reaching out to those, key contacts that spring to mind. So you might be writing the piece, writing the pitch, and you're like, oh, this journalist would be great for that. So adding those in initially. And then, yeah, in that case of the norovirus story, obviously it was trending. So going out to SEO journalists and nationals were kind of the next step. So adding those in. And then, like you say, doing kind of doodle searches for norovirus and adding in anyone that's recently spoke about the topic. Just make sure if you're doing that, though, that you're kind of adding a secondary angle for them. So if they've already written about it, why would they be bothered about your story? So yeah, just make sure that you're not kind of sending them what they've already covered, essentially. So I think it's fine. In this case, we did actually do that, but just make sure that you're adding another element or another kind of valuable piece of information, which can help them kind of formulate a story throughout their articles. And then, yeah, I would extend it then a bit more to kind of general health writers, adding in a few more, using kind of Rox Hill to kind of get more relevant contacts as well. But yeah, I would always keep it quite concise and making sure that you're not just going to anyone, and making sure that they are actually kind of writing about health and those kind of topics.
Yeah, I mean, do you find the media databases like Rox Hill, are they accurate in the way that they kind of categorize people? If they say they write about health, is it pretty much on point?
I think it can be tricky because journalists do tend to change their beat quite often. So, you might find that you had a really good journalist in mind that wrote about, I don't know, lumps one day, and then that over the course of the couple of months they've moved their focus away. So it can be quite tricky. So yeah, while I do use those kind of databases, I'd always suggest just triple checking that they're actually writing about that topic still. And I know it can be a bit of a long-winded process, but I think it just ultimately then helps you secure more pieces of coverage. So yeah, just making sure that you're kind of checking that they're still writing about that topic. But for kind of, broader national contacts, I think it can be really good for obviously finding new journalists that might not be on your radar.
Yeah, one question I had speaking with somebody else was this idea of like people who cover breaking news. Like there are those contacts, right, at major news publications that just cover breaking news versus the health writers. So are you also reaching out to those as like your first line of outreach as well?
Yes, it depends what the piece is that you're outreaching, really. I feel like typically a lot of our outreach will fall under kind of more like health, lifestyle, pets, where there's a kind of core group of journalists writing about those topics. So yeah, we don't necessarily reach out to kind of breaking news as much as part of kind of our activity. But I'd say SEO journalists are probably where we kind of feed into that. So, like with the norovirus, and they tend to cover more kind of PR content as well. Whereas I feel like kind of breaking news tend to cover, more kind of hard news stories, if that's what you call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
PR stories.
Car crashes and fires or something. And then, yeah.
Good.
Can you just briefly clarify when you say SEO journalists, are these the journalists that write, they have a specific beat, but they're also like half of their content is SEO driven for the publication?
Yeah, so typically SEO journalists will cover SEO, like trending topics, essentially. So they will cover pieces that users are searching for. So, for example, if there's something trending on Google Trends, naturally the perfect fit for that would be an SEO journalist. So they are, writing about topics that people are searching for, essentially. So they don't necessarily have a key beat. I would say it can be quite broad because obviously it can be quite broad what's trending. But they're great for anything like, kind of seasonal pieces like Bonfire Night was a big one recently. And norovirus, those kind of key moments that happen, adding those SEO journalists in. And typically they can cover content quite quickly as well because of the nature of it. So if it is something that is literally trending, you'll find it gets covered quite quickly. Whereas, more lifestyle pieces or interior journalists, they can take a lot more longer to kind of cover the pieces because it's not got that sense of urgency, I guess.
Yeah, I've never actually heard the term SEO journalist. Maybe I'm wondering if it's like a UK specific thing or I'm just totally out of the loop. But it sounds like it's maybe also people who are covering like maybe I've seen like trending topic journalists or something like that's their beat is like trending topics.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. It's those people. Yeah, I never heard that before. Okay, so to kind of put a bow on this whole conversation, it seems like the reactive piece is something that like I don't want this to sound like I'm casting a bad light on it, but it's like it seems like a lot of work to be kind of always monitoring the news and looking for opportunities, and there might not be any opportunities. So what like how do you kind of pitch this? How do you think about this internally? Because it does seem like something I kind of know one of the answers for sure, like, but I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on the benefits of this outside of just getting coverage.
Yeah. So yeah, I'd say there's two kind of sides to it. So like I kind of mentioned, it's that supporting element to the strategy. So, when a client is onboarding with us, and initially a lot of the time on the account will go into strategy ideation, and it can take a while for the first piece or campaign to actually be built and launched. So Reactive comes in really handy then, because you are able to get quick win results, especially if you're using kind of on-site content or blog content that they might already have. So I'd say that's where it can be really helpful in those kind of that first quarter, essentially, of kind of onboarding a new client. And then I'd also say around kind of reputation management. So from the brand side of things, having a kind of consistent stream of links and coverage in the media helps to kind of boost your reputation. So that, alongside obviously the campaigns and stories, again, kind of helps to support it all. And then from an SEO point of view, it's again that supporting kind of pillar. So, the key focus areas that you might be targeting, again, Reactive can just kind of help to support that strategy and essentially just kind of boost the work that you're doing. It's that extra kind of layer, and it helps to get more results as well. So yeah, I definitely see it as part of a holistic strategy, and not kind of single channels.
Yeah, and it's what I was thinking with this is like, even if you do like set out to spend X amount of time monitoring news and for reactive possibilities or potentials, even if you don't get any, like the fact that you're monitoring and building relationships with journalists, like that has so many more benefits. So it shouldn't be thought of as just like this isolated thing. It should be, like you're saying, it's opportunistic, it's built into everything else you're doing, and it should just kind of, to me, it gets the like PR brain, like how can we make this into a story? It's almost like a good practice to just kind of get into that mindset and stay into that mindset. That's invaluable for digital PR, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, yeah, like you say, it just helps to kind of connect with journalists in the space. So whether the reactive doesn't actually result in anything, you're building those relationships and able to then kind of hopefully go on to secure further coverage through other tactics.
Yeah. Well, this has been great, Alice. Thank you so much for walking through this. And I think you and I were talking about a case study on a reactive piece that Embryo has done. So for those listeners, I'll put it in the show notes, but stay tuned, check it out on the BuzzStream blog and social media and that sort of thing. You can find Alice on LinkedIn, connect with her there, ask her questions about reactive PR, Embryo, what they're doing. Like I said, like, subscribe, comment on this stuff. If you do have questions for us, for me, for Alice, comment on the video, and sure, Alice would also be happy to jump in and provide some tips and tactics. So thanks again for watching. Thanks again, Alice, for joining us. This has been really great.
Thanks for having me.
And thanks again for watching.